Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 67 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of trauma experienced in domestic violence with our very special guest of the week, Clinton Patton Sr. Be sure to go check him out after the episode and show him some love. It is Clinton Sr. Speaks on TikTok. That is ClintonSpeaks over on TikTok. Remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in our Discord in the podcast participants channel along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. And just a quick disclaimer before we start. I am not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of these topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in our descriptions. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. And at the top of the show, we'd like to give some resources for those experiencing domestic violence. If you or someone that you love is being abused, the sexual assault hotline from RAINN is 1-800-656-4673. Please contact them if you are in need of help. The hotline is open to call 24/7. Again, the number is 1-800-656-4673. The domestic abuse hotline is 1-800-799-7233. That is 1-800-799-SAFE. They are also free to call 24/7. Persons can also contact the hotline through an email request through the hotline website, which will be in our descriptions. Services are provided free without regard to race, color, national origin, religion, gender, age, or disability, including deaf or hard of hearing. Assistance is available in English and in Spanish, with access to more than 170 languages through the telephonetic interpreter services. Domestic abuse and intimate partner violence are very serious public health issues globally. In fact, it is believed that domestic abuse is one of the most prevalent but least reported crime here in the United States. Today, we will be discussing how to recognize abuse, how to prevent it from further occurring, how to get out of an abusive situation, and how to treat yourself with love and respect after an abusive situation. I want all of my listeners to know that you are worthy of love and respect, and you never, ever deserve any type of abuse. If you are in need of support, please reach out to us via our Discord, or if you're watching us on YouTube, please comment down below your story. We'd love to connect with you and show you some support. And if you'd like to support our podcast, hitting that like button and subscribing really helps us out a lot. What also really helps is if you share this show with your friends, especially those of us that are going through hard times, to let them know that they can get some support. Any support for the podcast helps out a lot. So if you feel compelled to, like, comment, subscribe, and share the show. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please rate the show. That really helps us out a lot. All right, let's get into this interview. Hi, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So today we're going to be talking about domestic abuse. So for those of you guys listening, viewer discretion is very much advised in this episode. Please take care of yourself if you notice yourself getting elevated. At the top of the show, we like to give the domestic abuse hotline, which is 1-800-799-7233. Or if you're in an emergency situation, please never hesitate to call 911. So introduce yourself to our audience. Who are you? Where can we find you?
I am Clinton Patton Sr., and I am based in Oklahoma City. I am a relationship and trauma coach. I was a therapist for about 15 years. So I started a nonprofit organization which helps people to get out of situations that are domestically abusive. I started in my sister's name. Her name is Ashley Renee Hamilton, so it's the Ashley Renee Hamilton Foundation. It's an organization that is on a mission to end domestic violence through education. Um, my sister was murdered in 2007. So in 2007, I began my quest to create awareness for domestic violence so that we could have better communities and to improve our relationships.
I'm very sorry for your loss. That is truly horrible, but I'm sure your sister is immensely proud of you and the work that you are accomplishing today. And I'm sure she's going to be very proud of you for this episode. Um, Before we get into the interview, are you comfortable with discussing your personal experiences?
Yes.
Okay. To make sure I'm not crossing any of your boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. We can also take a break. And if you don't feel like answering a question, just let me know. My priority is to make sure that you feel comfortable at all times. So, you were talking about how you started your foundation because of your sister's murder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, could you share a little bit more about that experience?
Well, Friday, August the 10th, I was at work. I was getting ready to go into my shift, and my sister called, and she was like, "Hey, Big Clint, what are you doing?" And I was like, sitting out in my car, listening to my radio before I get ready to go into work. And so, we had a conversation, and I was talking about a 40 cal that I had just bought, and she was like, "Big Clint, you know that I'm scared of guns." I said, "Yeah, you'll never see it." So we're laughing and joking, and she says, "Well, I'm getting ready to go back to school." I said, "Oh yeah." She said, "Yeah." I said, "What you gonna major in?" She said, "I'm gonna major in psychology." And I said, "All right." So I was smiling. I said, "You want to be just like me, huh?" She said, "Yeah, it's my brother." And I was like, so we started talking, and she said, "I don't know why that boy got that gun. I'm scared of that gun." And I said, "What are you talking about? What gun?" And I said, "Did he threaten you with it? Did he pull it on you?" She said, "No, that boy ain't that crazy." I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "He didn't threaten you with it, or did he pull it on you?" She said, "No, Big Clean, that boy ain't that crazy." And I was like, "If something like that happened, would you tell me?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll tell you." So, okay, I got off the phone and went into work. The next day, it was the 11th. Around 6 o'clock, I was at my uncle's house. We were celebrating because my cousin had just graduated from college. And my sister called and she talked to everybody that was there. And then I got the phone, and then she was like, I said, "Well, why didn't you come down here?" She said, "Well, I can't go nowhere without no money. And, I had to work." So she um, said that she was about to go to sleep. And I told her to call me back when she got up. So August the 12th, about 4 p.m., 4 o'clock in the morning, I mean, the police department called my sister's mom at the time and asking her, "What is your relation to Ashley Hamilton?" And she, told her that was her daughter. And so I was asleep in my room at my dad's house, and I woke up, and I'm thinking that I'm dreaming, and I could hear the crying and the wailing and stuff like that. And I get up and I'm like, "No, I know this ain't what I'm listening to." And so I open the door and I look into the living room and I see everybody gathered around. And I walk into the living room and I said, "Why is everybody crying? Like, what's going on?" And my sister's mom at the time looked at me and said, "That boy killed your sister." And I said, "Killed my sister? What do you mean killed my sister?" And so I went and got my cell phone at the time and I texted her, and then I called, and I waited for the call to come back, and it never came. So I ended up going. It happened in Mississippi, so I ended up going to Mississippi, and then I found out that she was in an abusive relationship, and they just never told me. And so that was my reasoning for. I take it extremely serious. Like, threats are I take threats extremely serious. Just
Mm.
for the simple reason that, it just keep playing over and over in my head. Like, he's not that crazy. Like, and there's no way he's gonna do that. He's not that crazy. But when you have someone who wants power and control, they're willing to do anything to get it.
Mm. So your sister's abusive relationship, I mean, you keep saying that your sister kept saying, "Oh, he isn't that crazy." It sounds like a lot of denial. And it's just like, when we are in a relationship, we're always trying to see the better parts of people, you know? I'm,
Well, sometimes in those situations, you have the idea that you want to protect your family. You don't want your family members to get hurt. So you will hold those things in, feeling like you have to hold them in so you don't want nothing to happen to your family. Or in most cases, you don't want nothing to happen to the batterer because there's something called battered wife syndrome. And, it's it's extremely difficult in those situations because from the outside looking in, people expect you to just leave. And it's not that easy. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have domestic violence because people would just be able to leave, but it's not. And it's not easy to leave because there is psychological warfare, what I call it, psychological warfare, because it is a battle of the minds. And the mind is held captive once they are able to establish a excessive level of fear.
Hmm. So that's a really interesting thing because I haven't experienced that type of domestic abuse. I experienced what I consider domestic abuse from, my family, but not intimate partner violence. Um, I had a brush with, some domestic abuse, like witnessing my friend's mother get abused and how my friend would tell me like for 10 plus years, keep telling me that she's like, "Oh, I think my mom is finally going to leave my dad. I'm so excited." And we helped them like when he was gone, pack up the house so many times. And so many times she just kept going back and I think she's still with him. And she would always correlate it, her mother would always correlate it, well, if he gets right with God, like he's supposed to protect me. That's the Christian relationship. Like if he gets right with God, then he'll be able to, make it right with me. And she was like, it's not Christian to get divorced. But what really hurt me as like a child, because I was a child when all this was going on, was my friends would have, like the girls would have bruises all up and down their arms from their dad grabbing them, spanking them, hitting them. And what I still can't, grasp in my mind is why you wouldn't leave for the child. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, once you are in a cycle of abuse, you kind of lose touch with reality. And when someone is being abused, they don't have the capacity to have to think rational when it comes to protecting their child. It's hard for them to protect the child if they can't protect themselves. And how what makes it difficult to protect themselves is when the abuser is able to again instill excessive fear, because there's fight, flight, and freeze. And most of the time when someone is in these type of situations, they freeze or they don't have the resources to be able to leave. And that could be they don't have resources to get counseling or to be able to sustain their basic needs on their own because sometimes they're in a situation and they are financially abused as well. So they Then when they're financially abused, they feel stuck. So now they got to walk on eggshells, right? So then another thing when it comes to uh, abusers, they lead the victim to believe that they are the only person that will ever love them or need, or that person will need. So now you have the fear of losing someone who's abusive because they have given you this idea that them loving you is control, or them loving you is isolating you, and and treating you as a possession.
I think I really do resonate with that aspect of, you know, the fear of loss of love or of, you know, unknown. The fear of unknown, I think, really does have a grip on especially people that have been abused because they don't really know what real, compassion, love, understanding is. Um, and or they don't think that they deserve it because they've been broken down so many times, so frequently, that the abuser's reality of who they are, or what the abuser says who they are, my puppy is growling. What the abuser says who they are somehow becomes their, identity. Um, Sorry, whenever my dog like comes up to my computer, she like switches off my camera. How did you start to begin your own personal healing journey after the loss of your sister?
Um, I had to decide if I had to decide what I wanted to do, and it came a point where I had to decide if I was going to be vengeful or if I was going to do something to um, end domestic violence at the time, because I grew up in a household filled with it as well. I just didn't know what it was called, or what name it had for it or whatever. But I grew up in a house like that, and that was very, very traumatic for me. And even as a man, we have things that, we have triggers, and those triggers sometimes go back to that trauma. So what I had to do, and what I continue to do, was I make sure that I'm one in reality, and that I understand the true authentic meaning of what love is. So along my healing journey, I've learned the authentic love, even for myself. So that means that a person who has authentic love, they have no ill intentions of hurting anyone. So they are careful with their words. They are loving, and even when they disagree, like they don't have a craving for power and control. They more so want to enter into a reciprocated loving relationship. And so for myself, I've turned to like educating myself on certain things, being a father to my kids, um, surrounding myself with people who aren't abusive. Um, I also hold men accountable who are abusive. And so I've just devoted my life to creating, helping people to start and maintain healthy relationships.
What are some common misconceptions about domestic abuse that you've encountered during your work?
Domestic violence is only physical. Domestic violence is emotional, physical, sexual, financial, spiritual, and some people feel like it's psychological as well. So there are several forms of domestic violence. Just because someone isn't hitting you, then it doesn't mean that it's not domestic violence. And domestic violence is not limited to intimate relationships. It can also be family members as well.
Mm. Yeah, I really resonate with that because um, a form of domestic abuse that I faced growing up was financial abuse from my mother, especially when my daddy was no longer in the picture because he had a traumatic brain injury and he couldn't be in the picture. Um, my dad made it a point to always provide for his kids. And when I got into college, he put it on me and my siblings as well. He was like, your job is school. He's like, I don't want you getting another job and then worrying about money. Let that be my worry. I'll worry about money. You worry about school. You worry about getting your education, making yourself a better person. And then when you come back, if you ever need money, you call me, you let me know. If you want to work for me, because he owned his own company, he was a very hardworking man, a son of immigrants from Jamaica. So he really valued hard work. And he wanted us to go to college. He wanted us to get a higher education. And in June of 2020, he was hit by a car and suffered from a traumatic brain injury and got into a vegetative state. And um, because it was 2020, it was COVID, and also I was home at the time, um, you know, I was 19. Both of my younger brothers were minors, and we had always been reliant upon our father. And my mother, for whatever reason, which I think it's a control issue, she didn't want us to go back to school and waste her money, which it wasn't her money, it was my daddy's money. And my dad had set up a individual bank account. And he called the bank account My Dad Is Awesome to send us like automatically money, especially for me at school, and pay for my tuition and also my school expenses. And when she found that out, she claimed that I was stealing money from her. And she immediately took me and my minor brothers off of the car insurance, the health insurance, the phone plan, the iCloud, and changed the locks on the house. So we couldn't get back in to our own house or get our stuff. And it it made me, she was like, now you're responsible for your brothers. You figure it out. She would say that to us all the time. You figure it out. She's like, my responsibility is to my husband. Like she would always call my dad her husband, like all the time. She's like, he's my husband, he's mine, he's my responsibility. And of course, I was very distressed over what was happening with my dad, but I didn't realize she had like done all of that until I couldn't call with my phone and I got up to school and my tuition wasn't paid for. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I got called into the bursar's office and they're like, you can't go back to school. You have no money. You have no money to go to school. And I had no housing anymore because she removed all of the funding. And so I had to prove to the Texas board that my mother was abusive. And they said, yeah, that's financial abuse. And I had no idea what financial abuse was before. They're like, yes, that's financial abuse because Texas law, if you are a student, no matter if college, whatever, you are not legally independent from your parents until you turn 25. So legally, they have to be put on your FAFSA paperwork, everything. She also removed herself from my FAFSA paperwork, which just shocked me to no end. And they're like, that's reason enough. It's like you have no income. Okay. You have 4.0 GPA. Okay. We'll give you a full ride. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And I use my degree to this day, but I had no idea that financial abuse existed. And it's a blessing and a curse because I started to get counseling and start to comprehend the level of enmeshment that my mother tried to put onto me and my siblings growing up. And then the discard, like when she decided that we were no longer of use to her, that she didn't really want me anymore. And if anybody's relating to that, that's domestic abuse as well. Like Clinton was saying, domestic abuse can be from, your parents, a family member. Um, in your opinion, Clinton, why is it important to recognize domestic abuse can happen to anyone regardless of their gender, socioeconomic status, or background?
Because it's dangerous and it becomes a life and death situation right before you know it. The longer a person stays in a situation like that, the worse it's gonna get, and it's gonna come in cycles. So there's gonna be cycles where it feels really good and there's nothing going on, but then there's gonna be cycles where it's gonna be a lot of things going on, including abuse and stuff like that. And and those cycles, in between those cycles, is hope. And sometimes people who are in those situations feel like they feel hopeful that the person will change. But all it takes is one time in those cycles for the person to get hit the wrong way, or a person to include a gun, which makes you at 350% chance of dying by that gun. So it's very, very dangerous. Also, strangulation is now a felony. It takes about 3 pounds of pressure to strangle someone. And in domestic violence situations, I think it's the second leading cause of death. Also, I wanted to include um, domestic violence happens to men as well. It's men and women are victims of domestic violence in this country every day.
And you were saying previously that you've experienced domestic violence in your own home. Would you care to elaborate on that for us?
The environment that I lived in growing up was extremely toxic, and it was abusive. It was a lot of yelling and pushing and stuff like that. It was a lot, and um, sometimes we as parents feel like we're doing the best thing that we can do for our kids, but sometimes that best is what traumatizes our kids if we're not watching what we're really doing and making good decisions based on what type of environment do we want for our children. And as a parent, it is very imperative that we recognize the childhood trauma that we have sustained and to go get some type of help so that we don't create that type of environment for our own kids. It's pretty much breaking trauma bonds, generational trauma bonds.
Hmm. I like that you pointed out generational trauma. It is also in our DNA as well. Um, the trauma that we endure passes on generationally and can manifest as diseases. Um, my grandmother, who is from Jamaica, told me one day she's like, I wasn't abused growing up, but I know that your papa was. And I was like, okay. I was a little kid. I was like, okay. I brushed that off. And then when I got older, I was like, why do you know that Papa was abused? And she's like, well, the way Papa disciplined our children, number one, and number two, the stories that he would tell, and number three, what happened to his body as he got older. Um, she said like stress changes your chemistry, your body chemistry, the cortisol levels start to change, break down your muscles. And as you get older, muscle is what really sustains you as a person. As you age, the amount of muscle really helps. And I started to notice it. My papa, before he passed away, started getting very sick all the time, like very sick, started getting really bad strokes, just very, very ill. He was in and out of the hospital all the time. And my daddy would always tell me growing up, he was like having a black father who was raised in a very abusive single mother household. He's like, your papa had it rough. He'll tell you he had it rough. He ran barefoot in Jamaica, but he had it rough. And the papa that you know that's raising you now is not the papa that raised me. Like, is a very different man. He's like, he's one of seven boys and one sister in a very patriarchal single mother household where his daddy abandoned them and then started a whole new family in England. He's like, yes, your papa tried to be a better dad for me and my brothers, but he took it to the extreme. He would tell me all the time. And it wasn't until I got older that I now start to recognize what he meant by he took it to the extreme. Like my papa would physically like hit his sons, and he had four sons, physically hit his sons, yell at his sons, and tell them they should know better when they're children. Children don't know anything yet. There's no such thing as knowing better as a child unless you're taught better. And I feel overwhelmingly sad for my dad because the father that he had really put a lot of weight on my dad's shoulder to be a much better dad. And my dad really, really was. Like he would say all the time, oh, my papa always claimed to be the provider, but we were always struggling financially and hardly had any food on the table, and then would put so much pressure on my mom, my Mimi, to feed the children and say, that's your job. Your job is to feed them, but she has no money to feed them. And it's it was so sad because, you know, that generational trauma really carried on to my dad of my dad, like, you know, my papa had an absent father, so my papa tried to be a present father, but a very demanding father. And then my dad was like, I don't want to be a demanding father. I want to be a present father that guides my children in the way that they should go. But I noticed with my dad, and something that my brothers pointed out to me is like, you were raised by a different dad than we were raised by a dad because we're boys. Dad raised us very different. Dad would spank us. Dad never spanked you. And that really hurt my heart as well because, you know, all of the grown men that raised me, both my grandfathers and my daddy, are now passed away. And my brothers would tell me all the time that dad is so much nicer to you. Dad isn't nice to me. And it changes my perception of my dad. And it's really sad. Why do you think that fathers are more likely to hit their sons than their daughters?
Because of society views on how a man is supposed to act, and they think that hitting is a way of hitting is discipline, or if they use biblical terminology like sparing the rod, spoil the child. Some people actually think it's a rod or a belt or whatever. That if you're hitting your kids, you're disciplining them and teaching them the right way.
What would you tell to a man about your views on disciplining a child?
Well, I'm a talker. So with my children, I talk to them. I consider myself like a sensei because I take other things, other alternatives outside of hitting to get my point across or to teach. And I allow my children to have a voice. They could come talk to me about their emotions or whatever they're feeling and anything. And that's where I take the opportunity to guide them, but I make sure that their feelings are valid.
Mm. That is really inspiring, and I'm very glad that you're that type of father. You were talking about previously how you'll talk to both men and women who are abusers and try to influence them positively. How did you first start that?
I had to figure out what genuine love is and meet them where they are, but meet them from a place that It's authentic in love.
Mm. I've, according to like my research, because I've done a lot of research over this topic, most, if not all, people that have been abused st tend to follow an abusive pattern in their future relationships and inflict abuse without knowing. What would you say to those people about differentiating themselves from that abuse and unlearning that way of being?
For anybody who is engaged in abusive behaviors and don't know it, you have to take a look at self. You have to figure out what is it that you hate about yourself and do the opposite. And that means surrounding yourself with people who are going to hold you accountable. Everybody makes mistakes, but mistakes don't have to be consistent. They don't have to be constant. Those are things that you can learn from. And you have to remember that you are human. And the person that you are abusing is human, and they have family members that love them that wouldn't want anything to happen to them, just as well as you have family members that love you and won't want nothing to happen to you as well. So it's very imperative that you understand that extended lust is not love. Extended lust is the time period in which abuse happens. And I know that a lot of people don't really discuss it because we have so many different definitions of love, but love is love is pure. You know what I mean? It's pure. It is. The four-letter word LOVE is pure, and it has nothing to do with it's not a period of time because when a person who is authentically loving, they will love you infinitely. Their love for you never stops. So you might not hear someone who understands what love is. You're not going to probably hear them say, well, I fell out of love or I don't love this person anymore. Because once, if a person can tell you that they fell out of love with you or they didn't love you, then to me, it's like you never loved me in the first place because you never made that choice. So what happens is we entered into this time period of lust, right? So the lust it comes in cycles as well. You're feeling good about the person, you're having the butterflies, you are feeling like this relationship is the best thing on the planet, but then something happens and boom, now you're mad at the person, or there's abuse that happened, or you have a disagreement. And then once you make up, then boom, here comes the lust again. So now you have cycles of lust mixed up. It's like a roller coaster. But the cycles of lust is that's what I've coined extended lust. And extended lust is fake love. So sometimes you get in a relationship with people who tell you they love you, which can be considered love bombing. They encourage you to believe that their love is abusive. So now you're thinking that it's love and love is a good thing. So now you feel like the abuse that you're sustaining is a good thing because it is, you're led to believe that or gaslit into believe that it's love.
Mm. What are some long-term psychological effects that survivors of domestic abuse often experience when in cycles of lust, as you were saying?
Depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress as well. You have physical ailments that come from being abused, memory loss. There are cardio issues. There's a lot that could go on with someone who has experienced domestic violence.
Mm. How does domestic violence impact children? What are some challenges faced by survivors who want to protect their children?
Well, children between 3.3 to 10 million children witness domestic violence every year in this country. Children who experience domestic violence, they're at a 50% rate of becoming a juvenile delinquent. Boys are 50% of becoming a juvenile delinquent, and girls are, if I'm not mistaken, they're at a 50% rate of becoming an alcoholic or using substances. to cope. And that could go both ways, boys and girls.
Mm.
And it's traumatic for them as well. It creates anxiety and depression, and it also creates suicidal ideation. Uh, Having a child experience that type of trauma can lead to them wanting to unalive themselves.
What would you say to a young person listening to this podcast about witnessing their parents in an abusive situation?
Well, although it feels like there's nothing that you can do because you didn't put yourself in that position, there is something that you can do. You can learn from it and you learn to do the opposite of what you are seeing. Take the time to write in your journal. If you can go places to kind of to clear your mind, take a walk around your neighborhood or go out and play some type of sport or something. Um, it's wrong and you're right. If you know it's wrong, so you don't have to question yourself. And just because it's your parents, that doesn't mean that they're not wrong. They're actually absolutely wrong if that's what you are witnessing at home. Um, for me, I've had to go outside. I've had to turn outside. Like I write poems. Excuse me, I write poems or I write music. I noticed about myself that when I would draw, that would take me to another world. So even drawing, even if you can't draw, it doesn't matter how it looks. It's the point of getting everything that you're experiencing off of your chest now, so that you don't hold it in and become the person that you do not like.
Mm. I think that's very beautiful to point out. Um, to make sure that you start to seek out creative pursuits so that you don't let, it's going to impact you, but you don't let it change the person that you are. Um, can you talk about the process of rebuilding one's life after leaving an abusive situation?
Your first step is deciding that you deserve better. The second step is establishing what you feel you deserve and understanding that what someone else did was not your fault. And having the courage to seek out professional help, but help that's going to allow you to remain human. Um, being proactive and doing things to help you to remove yourself from survival mode. Um, Understanding that there is no fear in love because perfect love casts out all fear, and one who's made in fear lives in torment. Understanding that there is no fear in love, and understanding that love doesn't hurt, and that's including yourself. So you may have to read self-help books. Um, I wouldn't try to understand it so much because you're not that type of person. So it's going to be extremely difficult for you to understand why a person that does that behaves that way. So I would do more of an understanding of how do I love myself again? Go out and do the hobbies that you used to do the things that you used to love, and continue to speak positive to yourself because it is difficult. We often hold on to the negative things that is said to us because it's hurtful. So for every negative remark that you've heard, you have to have at least 10 to 15 positive things to outweigh that one to start to make you feel better. But feeling better and getting on and starting your healing journey is a choice. You have to realize that there are people who love you and care about you, and they want you to live as long as possible. But they want you to have a loving, fulfilling, and healthy relationship. No one wants to be alone. Relationship is the most important concept on the planet. Without relationship, we wouldn't be here having this conversation because it took four people We know 4 people to make both of us, right? But then it took 4 people to make the people who made us. So it is important. So that's why we have to make them healthy.
I think that's a really good thing to point out. Like, it's a really good thing to point out that we do need relationships. We do need active community. And speaking about community, what role can public education and awareness campaigns play in preventing domestic abuse?
Remove the gender bias and knows that it affects everybody, that is everybody, everyone that's around, and create a more diverse create make sure the education is diverse, that is reaching every community.
Hmm. Do you think children in public schools should be taught about domestic abuse?
I think they should be taught about I think they should be taught how to start and maintain healthy relationships.
Hmm. What does that look like to you if you were speaking to a child and they were like, how can I start to build a good relationship?
It looks like teaching them how to love themselves first.
That's sweet. That makes me smile. What advice would you give to someone who suspects a friend or a loved one is in an abusive relationship, but they don't know how to help them?
Never give up on them. Listen to them. Don't ask them why they're staying. Just let them talk and be open to them when they need you, but also keep in mind safety first. Safety first. Do not put yourself in a position that could cost you your safety. However, be available for the person and understand you have to be extremely patient because they do go back. It takes between 7 to 12 times before a person actually leave a domestic violence relationship. Remember, they're human, and you have to love them where they are.
What would you say to someone who is in an abusive relationship, but they're on their healing journey and they notice that their relationship is getting better? Would you instruct them to still leave, or would you instruct them to, what would you tell them to do?
In my opinion, abusers don't stop abusing because they don't see themselves as a problem. That sounds like it's another cycle.
Mm,
They get, you can feel like you're on your healing journey. You can't heal in the environments that hurt you.
mm, that's very powerful. That's very, very powerful. That's what I had to tell my brothers when they kept trying to triangulate me and get me to speak to my mom again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it's like um I can't I can't do it. Can't go back. Like if she's getting better, she's healed, she's doing better, that's great. I'm happy for her. But for my own safety, not just like physically or whatnot, but mentally, spiritually, I need to be as far away from that person as possible. Because when I was 15, I still endured abuse from her. I tried to commit suicide. And instead of getting me help, my mom cursed me and told me I was the problem and forced me to live with my grandparents. And, eventually my grandparents sent me back when they thought I was cured. But I really like the saying of you can't heal in the place that made you sick in the first place. Because every time, because I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from, just living in that house. Like every time I drive past that house, I like have a panic attack. Like it's horrible. I don't want to ever go back there. I really don't. I think it's a very beautiful, eloquent thing to point out. It's like you cannot heal in the place that made you sick in the first place. Um, do you think people that have abused others can heal from that and become better people?
No,
Why do you think that?
they don't. They just change victims.
Hmm. How can communities create safer environments for victims of domestic abuse to come forward and seek help?
Stop treating them as if it's their fault. Stop victimizing them with the systems that you have in place. Hold abusers accountable by giving them consequences that are more stiff when it comes to that. Stop treating victims as if they are numbers or it's a money grab. See victims as human and provide them with the right of protection when it comes to that type of stuff. Um, Make sure that you, again, going back to holding the batter accountable, that means stop giving them a slap on the wrist. Um, when you have a murder that is the result of domestic violence, there should not be a plea bargain. That person should get life in prison. He took a life well before he took a life. And I say that because the dude who killed my sister he got 20 years and did about 8 and has been out ever since. But my sister's in the grave, and he killed her well before he killed her.
Mm, that's really sad. I'm really sorry. In your experience, what are some of the biggest barriers that survivors face when seeking legal or financial help after leaving an abusive relationship?
Feeling like the system is going to be used to victimize them again, and getting traumatized from it. Feeling like nobody's going to believe them. Feeling like the batterer is always going to win. Like nobody cares about them. Feeling like they don't matter.
Hmm. Do you think the legal system can be improved to protect victims of domestic violence, and how do you think it should be improved?
Absolutely, it can be improved. It can be improved. However, if there was a system where they could have some type of website where they can see people who has had domestic violence charges, and even if they were dropped, they should have a system to see that. Um, Create laws that are going to hold batterers accountable. I get it. They have laws now, but those laws, there are ways to get around them, like hold people accountable. And another thing society can do is for the people who are not being honest about being abused, stop. Just stop doing it because you are the problem. And that's why people who really need it can't get help because they had so many people that go down and use it as an excuse. Because again, you have people who use the system as a tool of abuse as well to abuse them. And so stop using the system for things that it shouldn't be used for. And that will help people to be able to decipher who's telling the truth and who's not.
Mhm. What challenges do you think marginalized communities face when accessing resources for domestic abuse, and how can we work to close that gap?
Well, first and foremost, resources. You close the gap by providing resources. Resources could be financial, housing, food. Provide, and when you live in a society where you clearly see that there's oppression in marginalized groups, how about we start there? We just provide equal opportunity for those in marginalized communities.
Mm. What message do you hope to impart on survivors who hear your story and attend your talks?
I want them to understand that they're human and that love doesn't hurt.
Mm. For you, what does it mean to be human?
Understanding that God is love and I am made in God's image. So that means I am love. And my love is correction. My love is protection. If I love you, I'm going to protect you at all costs. Just because God is love. And also, I believe wholeheartedly that there is no fear in love. So, as a person who is made in God's love, there is no way that I could have fear. So, if I don't have fear, then now I could be made perfect in love, but I don't have to be perfect as a human, but I can be perfect in love. And that's what we need in order to establish healthy relationships.
How do you personally take care of yourself emotionally and mentally while doing such heavy emotionally charged work?
Well, I'm active, so I play basketball or football or whatever, and then I have a group of friends that I talk to about things that transpire. I write music. I have my 6 year old, so I spend a lot of time with her, and I mean that's about it.
Hmm. In your view, how can men heal from being victims of domestic abuse?
As a man, we have to surround ourselves with people who actually love us for being human and not seeing us as only a man without emotion, but seeing us as humans who have emotions and who feel and who actually understands love and allowing us to have a place where we can express our emotions without feeling like we are being ostracized because we are human and being treated the way that the what being having reciprocal treatment, being treated the way that we treat a man that is loving is a loving man. And he's going to do everything in his power to love you. And I think moving forward, a man that is loving wants to be loved too. He wants to be desired. He wants to feel special. He wants to feel important. Like in relationships, it should be reciprocation of everything in that relationship, including financial.
What would you tell to a young man who is experiencing a form of abuse from his girlfriend because his girlfriend is taking out her issues on him?
Well, you're going to have to step away because you got to love yourself first. There are too many women or girls that are out here. You have to find one that loves herself so that you can love yourself. It's important because if you continue that relationship, you're going to start feeling self-doubt and you're going to start feeling insecure. You're going to start feeling depressed and anxious. It's not just about a looks or just to have a girlfriend. Just make sure you have to have the right girlfriend that's going to propel you into your destiny.
In your view, how can survivors reclaim their power and their voice?
Well, the first thing they can do is have the courage to leave, have the courage to leave. And then speak out to someone that you can trust. Tell them what's going on with you. Allow them to give you compliments. Allow them to motivate you. Seek out people who have had these type of situations and learn from them as well. You have to learn how to turn your trauma into triumph.
Trauma into triumph. That is beautiful. The saying of the podcast is transmuting um, pain into purpose. And I like trauma into triumph as well. That is very beautiful. On the podcast I have back here, it says trauma is not who you are, it's what you go through.
Hmm.
And I think it is very inspiring that you instead of becoming an angry person, became a loving person after the loss of your sister and decided to do something about it. I'm really inspired by your work and your perseverance and your courage to hold abusive people accountable, show empathy and compassion to the abused, and provide, resources. You are a resource within yourself to those who need it. I really appreciate it. How has your daily routine changed because of your experiences?
Oh, not much. I do this. I'm not much. I take care of my kid, and if I got something to do, I go do it. It hasn't changed much. I mean,
Okay. Speaking directly to our listeners, what would be your final message about healing from domestic abuse?
there is no fear in love, for perfect love cast out all fear. And one who was made perfect in love does not have fear because fear involves torment. And last but not least, regardless of what anybody tell you, I believe you and understand this: love does not hurt.
These are some ways that you can support someone who has been abused. Listen to the person and believe them. Honor where they are in their process and don't push your personal views on them. Offer assistance and let them know that they're not alone. Help them note down all the details they can remember. Remind them that they are not to blame for anything that has happened to them. Encourage them to seek out professional support either through a confidential hotline or a medical or mental health care provider. Encourage them to speak up about the abuse and report their abuser to the authorities, because keeping it a secret only protects the abuser and can only, by protecting the abuser, allow them to continue their abuse without any consequences. And also respect whatever choice that they make, and let them know that you'll be there regardless of what they decide. In our descriptions, we have domestic violence support groups, as well as our anonymous free Discord, where you can chat with anybody on there about what you're going through and get some peer support. Domestic abuse is very traumatic to experience. It leaves not only physical wounds, emotional scars, but also health issues. And it can affect every aspect of a person's life and make it very difficult for them to function. Recovery takes time, but speaking up about the abuse, leaving the abusive situation, and seeking treatment are very important steps that will help. I want to thank you so much, Clinton, for being on the podcast and sharing your story. Where can we find you so that our guests can check you out?
Right now, you can find me on all social media platforms, but you can also find me on TikTok, where I have videos about abusers and what they do, and it's an educational profile. So it's CP Senior Speaks. CP Senior Speaks across the platforms.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. If you're watching us over on YouTube, here are our memes of the week, carefully curated by those amazing people over on our Discord server. Now let's get into those memes. At the end of every episode, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. So let's try to find something that is relating to domestic abuse, or how I relate it to domestic abuse. Let's spin this wheel, shall we? It's a good spin. Ooh. So it landed in between distance and frustrated, withdrawn, irritated. When we are experiencing domestic abuse, we often feel very withdrawn from those that love us and support us because we have been isolated so often from those that love us and support us. Domestic abuse is very prevalent. A lot of people don't recognize domestic abuse when it's happening because it is so prevalent in our society and in our social media. Any abuse that is happening within your family structure or within your own intimate family, like say your spouse or even your children, it's not spoken about enough how isolating it is to be abused by someone that either you have been taking care of or is supposed to be taking care of you. We feel this innate sense of shame. And if we try to reach out for help, most of us fear judgment, fear that we are going to be criticized for, if it's a marriage, staying in the marriage, criticized for the way we parent our children if it's our children abusing us, or criticized if it's our parents abusing us, criticized for being like, well, it's your mom, it's your dad. You need to respect them. You're obviously doing something wrong. It's so prevalent, the shame, shaming other people for being a victim. The victim blaming is very intense in any DV situation, including shaming ourselves. Shaming ourselves to the point where we are suspicious of other people, where we distance ourselves from other people, where we withdraw from society because we don't think we're worthy. I want to reach out to anybody that this is resonating with. You deserve love. And I know you've heard that time and time again, but it's true. Every human deserves love. Okay? It's your birthright as a human. It is your birthright to be treated with decency. Okay? I want to reach out to you and say that you are worthy. And if you can get out of this situation, I would strongly recommend that you do, or at least use that distancing that you have been feeling towards things that, oh, I don't deserve this, and actually redirect it towards the person, people, or things that are actively abusing you, and distance yourself from them. I want to commend you for coming this far in the podcast. Not a lot of people do, so I really, really appreciate it. Special thanks goes out to all of our Discord users. Please take care of yourselves. I really appreciate you guys. If you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet. That is a handmade bracelet made by me, Grace, or you can get a sticker like the one on the back of my computer. All of those links are in our description. Any support helps us out a lot. So if you feel compelled to, please like, comment, subscribe, share the show. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show. Remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. I love you guys so much. I really, really do. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.